Good morning. Today we are going to study grammar. To be more specific, we are going to study two of the advanced tenses in English. We are going to study present perfect simple and present perfect progressive. They are advanced tenses not only in terms of the grammar, but also in terms of the way that we think about time. Both tenses are present tenses, but they are somehow connected to the past. They are used to connect the past with the present. Both tenses are used to describe or to express an action or an activity that started in the past and either still in progress, on progress or ongoing, or just completed. To understand more, we will ask a question. Are they exactly the same? Actually, they have a lot of similarities, but they are not exactly the same. There are slight differences between both tenses. Before starting to explain the difference between present perfect simple and present perfect progressive, let's have a quick overview of the formation of both tenses. Here, present perfect simple. Here, present perfect progressive. How can we construct the sentence in present perfect simple and present perfect progressive? Present perfect simple is formed with have or has, depending on the subject, plus the past participle, the third form of the verb. So, have or has as an auxiliary verb plus past participle. Whereas the present perfect progressive is formed with have or has, depending on the subject, plus been, plus the ing form of the verb, infinitive, plus ing. I have eaten the pizza. I have been eating the pizza. It's formed with present perfect simple, have or has plus past participle. I have eaten the pizza. Present perfect progressive is formed with have or has plus been, have or has auxiliary verb plus been, plus the infinitive plus ing, the ing form of the verb. In the later form, we just add not after the auxiliary verb have. I have not. So it's a negative form. Also here we will add not after the auxiliary verb have. So I have not been eating the pizza. This is how to form or how to construct the sentence in the present perfect simple and the present perfect progressive. Now we are going to explain the difference between present perfect simple and present perfect progressive. How and when to use this one or the other one. Okay. Present perfect simple is used when we want to describe a completed action. express a completed action, and we are focusing on the result. Here, the present perfect simple emphasizes the finished result. An example: I have fixed the car. It's completed action. I already finished fixing the car, and we can see the result. The car is good, the car is ready if we want to use it anytime. So, present perfect simple emphasizes the finished results. Whereas the present perfect progressive, we use it when we want to focus on the unfinished activity. Emphasizes unfinished activity. Example: I have been fixing the car. So here the action is still ongoing, unfinished action. We are focusing on the unfinished action. We are focusing on the action itself, the continuity of the activity. Another example to understand more: I have painted the sitting room blue. I have painted the sitting room blue. Here, the action is completed and we can see the result. We are focusing on the result. The sitting room already blue. If you will look at the words, you will find them blue. Whereas the present perfect progressive, I have been painting the sitting room blue. Here we are talking about unfinished activity. We are focusing on the activity itself. If you will look at the room, you will not find all the rooms are blue. Some walls will be blue and some other walls will not be blue because it's unfinished activity. We are focusing on the activity itself. We are focusing on the continuity of the activity or the action. Second difference. We use the present perfect simple when we want to tell how much of an activity is completed. We use the present perfect simple to tell how much of an activity is completed. Whereas we use the present perfect continuous to tell how long something has been happening, how long something has been happening. Example, the present perfect simple. My boss asked me to send a lot of emails today. I have already sent 10 emails. So here we are telling how much of the activity is completed. I have sent 10 emails. Whereas the present perfect continuous used to tell how long something has been happening. We are here focusing on the duration, the period of time. Example, he has been playing tennis for 2 hours. He has been playing tennis for 2 hours. Here, we use the present perfect progressive or continuous to tell how long something has been happening. We are focusing on the duration, whereas the present perfect simple used to tell you how much of an activity is completed. I have sent 10 emails. I have sent 10 emails. Third difference, we use the present perfect simple when we want to talk about how often or how many times something has happened. We use present perfect simple to tell how many or how often, how many times something has been happening. Whereas we use the present perfect progressive or the present perfect continuous when we want to emphasize that something is happening over a period of time. When we want to emphasize something happening over a period of time. Here, we want to tell or we want to talk about how often or how many times something has been happening. An example, I have called him several times but he didn't answer. Several times, it's how often. Or we can say, she has drunk 3 cups of coffee. It tells you how many times the activity or the action has been happening or has happened. Whereas we use, as we said, we use the present perfect progressive or the present perfect continuous when we want to emphasize that something is happening over a period of time. An example, my English has been improving since I started reading English novels. Has been improving since I started reading English novels. So here it emphasizes something happening over a period of time since I started reading. Whereas here it's used to tell how often or how many times action is completed. Fourth difference, we use the present perfect simple when we want to show that something is permanent. Whereas we use the present perfect progressive when we want to show that something is temporary. Example to understand. Present perfect simple used to show that something is permanent. I have worked at Vodafone for 20 years. I've worked at Vodafone for 20 years. It's here stable activities, long-lasting activity. So it shows that this activity is permanent. When we want to show that something is permanent, we use the present perfect simple. Whereas when we want to show that something is temporary, we use the present perfect progressive. An example, I usually work Cairo, but I have been working in Alexandria for the last 4 months. I usually work in Cairo, but I have been working in Alexandria for the last 4 months. So, working in Alexandria is not permanent activity. It's just temporary, because I normally work in Cairo. I usually study at home, but I have been studying in the library for the last 2 weeks. Studying in the library is not permanent, it's temporary, because I usually study at home. Fifth difference, and last difference, we can use action verbs and stative verbs with the present perfect simple. Whereas we can use only action verbs with present perfect or progressive. We cannot use stative verbs with present perfect progressive. Stative verbs, action verbs, the verbs that describe an activity, mostly physical activity. Stative verbs, it describes a state, like verbs of perception or senses, see, hear, smell, or verbs of emotions like hate, love, or verbs of thought and recognition like know, realize, recognize, mental states. And verb to be, it's stative verb. So we cannot use these verbs, stative verbs, with present perfect or progressive, whereas we can use stative verbs plus the action verbs with present perfect simple. For example, we can say, I have known Ahmed since 2010. I have known Ahmed since 2010. It's state verb. But we cannot say, I have been knowing Ahmed since 2010. We cannot use stative verbs with present perfect and progressive. So the last difference is we can use both action verbs and stative verbs with present perfect simple, whereas we can use action verbs only with present perfect and progressive. Let's recap. Present perfect simple is used when we want to describe a completed action and we are focusing on the finished results. Present perfect progressive used when we want to focus on the unfinished activity, emphasizes unfinished activity, focusing on the continuity of the action. We use the present perfect simple when we want to tell how much of an activity is completed, whereas we use the present perfect and progressive to tell how long something has been happening. Third, we use the present perfect simple to talk about how often, how many times something has happened. We use the present perfect and progressive when to emphasize that something happening over a period of time. We use the present perfect simple when we want to show that something is permanent. We use the present perfect progressive want to show that something is temporary. Some signal words that can help us to know which one of both tenses to use. Adverbs used with present perfect simple, like how often, how many, just, already, never, ever, yet. Just is used in the affirmative form. I've just finished my homework. Already used also in the affirmative form. I have already finished my homework. Never used in the negative form. I've never traveled to France. Ever used in the question form. Have you ever traveled to France? Yet used on the negative form. I haven't finished my homework yet. Adverbs used with present perfect progressive. All day, all week, recently, lately, all year, all month. It's all adverbs used with the present perfect progressive. I can say recently I've been trying to eat more healthy food. Lately I have been traveling to France many times. These adverbs can be used with present perfect to progressive. The last two adverbs that can be used with both present perfect simple and present perfect to progressive is since and for. Since and for. Since and for, two adverbs can be used with both present perfect simple or present perfect progressive. What's the difference between since and for? Since is used to describe a specific point in time. For is used to describe amount of time or period of time. If we look at the timeline here, this is now, this is past. Okay, for is used to express all that period of time. Since is used to tell about this moment, the moment when the action or the activity started. So, for followed by amount of time or period of time. Since is followed by a specific point in time. I can say, I have played tennis since 10 o'clock. Or, I have lived in Cairo since 2010. For, I have been living in Cairo for 10 years. It's amount of time or period of time. I have been playing tennis for 2 hours. It's also period of time or amount of time. So the difference between since and for, since is used to answer the question when. Since is used to answer the question when the action started. For is used to answer how long the activity has been happening. This is all about present perfect simple and present perfect progressive. Thank you for listening and see you tomorrow.